Hi, good morning. Thanks for
Muy
joining
buenos días.
us.
Muy buenos
We're
días
here
y
to talk
gracias por
about
estar
San
con nosotros.
Vicente. We'll start in about 3 or 4 minutes
Vamos a
as we wait
empezar
for
dentro
people
de
to
unos
join.
3 o 5 minutos. Bueno, para empezar quisiera recordarles a todos si tenemos alguna persona que habla en español y que está con nosotros el día de hoy, pues tenemos el servicio de interpretación en español. ¿Cómo puede acceder a esto durante la reunión? Es en la parte de abajo de su pantalla, ustedes podrán ver un icono que dice interpretación. Puede darle clic en el icono y seleccionar el canal de español. Durante toda la presentación vamos a tener este servicio, así que si en algún momento usted quiere realizar un comentario, alguna pregunta, puede hacerlo totalmente en español, que estaremos ayudándole con el idioma.
Hi, if you're just joining, we're going to give it another minute or two before we start. Thank you for being here. I still see people joining. All right, it's 10:04. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're here today to talk about a project that LADOT is working on to bring safety and mobility upgrades to San Vicente Boulevard between Olympic and Brea. Before starting, just a couple logistics. If you're new to Zoom, thanks for meeting us here on this platform. There are a couple things to note. There is a Spanish channel. You can access and listen on the Spanish channel by selecting the button at the bottom of the screen. There are several ways to participate and provide feedback today. You can, of course, ask questions using the Zoom Q&A feature. If you've called in on the phone, you can send emails to our program email address during the meeting to be answered live, which is ladot.active@lacity.org. We'll also be posting some survey questions for everyone to respond to, and we'll dedicate time to questions and answers after the presentation. After the meeting wraps today, we'll also compile a Q&A page to post on the project website and share with everyone who RSVP'd. So if you have to take off or if you miss something, please look for that resource going forward. So before we get started, we have a quick survey for you to let us know what brings you here, who you are, what best describes your relationship to San Vicente. And we'll give it about 30 seconds to a minute on that poll. And we'll give it another couple seconds on the poll. If we could get as many people to answer as possible, that'd be great. I'm sure some folks are multitasking since it is the middle of the day on a Thursday. Okay, and I'm going to close the poll. We have a few folks with us today who live here on or around San Vicente, and we have a number of folks who travel through the area on their way to work, school, or other activities. So thanks for being here. And now to introduce our LADOT project team. My name is Claire Eberly. I'm a transportation planner with LADOT. And I'll introduce my colleagues, Charlie, Babak, and Peter, if you could each say hello.
Hi, my name is Charlie Ho. I'm a transportation engineer on the LADOT active transportation team, and I'm working with Claire on this project.
Hello, my name is Babak Dorji, and I'm a transportation planner at LADOT.
Hey, I'm Peter Garcia, student professional worker, transportation planner with the active transportation team here.
Great. So our team obviously is here from the City of Los Angeles Department of Transportation. LADOT's mission is to lead transportation planning, project delivery, and operations in the city of LA. We work together and collaborate to deliver a safe, livable, and well-run transportation system in the city. And we work in partnership with other city agencies and are responsible for managing the city streets. So everything from parking management to safety improvements to traffic signals and stop signs. To give a quick overview of today's discussion, we'll provide some background and context for this project. We'll talk about why we're working on San Vicente and why now. We'll provide an overview of the potential design concepts and discuss some of the trade-offs and considerations to those concepts. And then we'll spend a good amount of time on questions and discussion. So you're happy to, you're welcome to drop questions in the Q&A box now, and we'll get to them after the presentation. So what brings us here to talk about San Vicente? The goals guiding this project are to connect neighborhoods, to improve safety for everyone, to expand mobility options and choices, to support recreation, health, and play on the corridor and in the neighborhood, and really throughout LA, and to make San Vicente a more livable street and a more welcoming public space. These goals reflect what we've heard from community members to date and the history, context, and conditions of this project. And they also reflect the values that define our work at LADOT to ensure that all people have access to safe, affordable, and accessible transportation choices. So how did this initiative on San Vicente come about, and why are we talking about this specific street? Going back several years to 2015, San Vicente was studied and included in the city's adopted Mobility Plan 2035, our guiding transportation policy for active transportation elements and prioritize for the highest quality active transportation elements. So that's what first put this street and this part of San Vicente specifically on the map for future consideration for improvements. This past year in 2020, early 2020, the city prioritized San Vicente for expedited pavement repair based on the conditions of the street. Last summer, LADOT began hearing from residents and community groups requesting that we consider mobility improvements for San Vicente. LADOT then began a project development process in fall 2020 to look at the street and potential design options and to begin to gather community feedback. Street repaving is scheduled to take place in June of this year. So if a project on San Vicente goes forward, we're anticipating implementation to take place on that timeline. And specifically the work that we're talking about, what's happening on San Vicente. Street resurfacing will be taking place from Orange Grove to La Brea. So LADOT will be working together with our partner agency, Streets LA, to make street improvements. The Bureau of Street Services has already scheduled this repaving to happen. Following resurfacing, LADOT will be installing fresh paint and pavement markings. This is an opportunity to make additional improvements efficiently and cost effectively. What does this mean for San Vicente? Timing matters. Resurfacing presents an opportunity. We have a chance to reconsider the street design and a potential to rebalance the street and improve safety and mobility by taking a look at what the traffic patterns are, who's using the street, and what the community would like to see changed. Basically what's working and what's not, and what we can do to make it better. During this process, it's typical to bring the street to current design standards and make essential safety improvements while we have this blank slate. We can also reconsider the configuration relative to current mobility needs and implement our adopted policy plans. The project area spans the corridor from the intersection of Fairfax and Olympic to La Brea. It's about 1.2 miles and connects and covers multiple neighborhoods, multiple residential pockets, and several commercial hubs along the way. It is heavily residential, so a lot of homes, many apartment buildings, and communities, but also full of community destinations, organizations, schools, and so forth. We're interested in who's in the neighborhood and who may be using San Vicente and how. So within a half mile of the project corridor, 34% of residents are under 30, 19% of residents are students, 9% of households do not have their own vehicle available and are using other modes to get around. And 20% of people get to work by modes other than single occupancy vehicles. So that would include carpooling, transit, walking, biking, and other modes like motorcycle or rideshare. So we know that people are getting around in different ways other than just vehicles, and some people who live in the area don't have access to a vehicle at all. This might not mean that they're necessarily biking everywhere, but it does mean that there's some other demands and interest in using the street in different ways. So this is also a really exciting, vibrant neighborhood, and I'm sure if you're here today, you know it better than I do, but it's full of great places. A number of community groups are already doing the work of building place and community on streets around the project area. This is a great opportunity to connect to community assets and destinations that really fill the neighborhood. And snapshotted here are some of those key community places. So Destination Pico, Little Ethiopia, and Destination Fairfax. The community streets that have been made into slow streets during COVID. And another really important change to the landscape is the future Purple Line stations at La Cienega, Fairfax, and La Brea. There are also many schools, places of worship, and local organizations. So we're thinking about the presence of kids, families, and seniors and others moving around the neighborhood. And we've heard from a lot of people that they generally have an interest in creating a safer neighborhood because in part they may be taking their kids to school or may be interested in walking to some of these places that they go every day or every weekend. In terms of the mobility context for San Vicente, what resources are here and what assets are here in terms of transportation? There's a lot going on, and it's a good time to think about how it can be re-envisioned to better serve everyone. So San Vicente as a corridor has significant connectivity benefits. In addition to connecting neighborhood amenities and assets, it's also part of a network that will help people get to future transit stations. The Purple Line stations or D-Line stations are planned to come online, and we've heard from community members that they're already thinking about the question of how they'll access those stations. What streets will they use, and will it feel safe and accessible? Metro is also working on a planning process to hear from the community and work on improvements to make sure the experience of traveling to and from stations is a good one. So we also have Destination Pico and Little Ethiopia, the Great Streets projects that are right there, and community hubs with small businesses that really create sort of central streets in the neighborhood. The Packard Slow Street and Saturn Slow Street, led by Destination Pico, are also in the neighborhood just south of San Vicente. And these are streets where temporary signage are installed to slow cars and make them space for socially distanced recreation and exercise during the pandemic. Also shown in green on this map is the existing bicycle network. So streets that already have some type of bike lane or bikeway. On San Vicente, this network drops at Redondo and picks up again at Wilshire. So between Redondo and Wilshire represents a gap where there are no bicycle facilities. So this is what's going on in the area right now. And it is a lot, and there are a lot of opportunities to connect these elements together. So on that note, we're going to switch gears to another survey to ask about how you travel on San Vicente. And there are two questions. How often do you travel here? And what modes of transportation are you usually using? And we'll give it about a minute. Okay, I'll give it about 5 more seconds on the survey before I close it. And thank you for those participating. It looks like we have definitely more people on our call than are able to participate in the survey, and that's okay. It's great to see a quick snapshot of responses. So in terms of how often people here today are traveling on San Vicente, it's a mix. And what modes of transportation are people usually using? It looks like a couple people their own cars, a couple people biking, and one person who's usually walking. So thanks for sharing that feedback. So we're now going to look at the existing conditions on San Vicente, and here's a view of the existing street. There are 3 lanes of traffic in each direction, the center median and parking at the curb. The street is pretty wide and creates a thoroughfare, but also creates a barrier between neighborhoods. Some community members have commented that it represents green space and access to green space, but it doesn't feel inviting or accessible. And it can be difficult to cross. It's a very long distance to cross. And obviously, as you can see in this image, the surface is in a poor state of repair, which isn't really comfortable for anyone traveling here. We took a look at some of the data to understand more about what's happening from a safety perspective. And the street has some safety issues and concerns. The speed limit was raised on San Vicente in 2019. Speed limits are set in California based on actual speeds pursuant to state law. So this means that we measure the speed people are actually driving and required to set in correspondence with that. The speed limit on San Vicente now is 40 miles per hour, but a speed study in 2017 to set the speed found that 80% of drivers were actually driving over 35 miles per hour, and 40% of drivers are driving over 40 miles per hour. So people are moving really fast across the board. There were 99 crashes in the 5-year data period from 2014 to 2018, which is the most recently available confirmed data. And crashes have disproportionately impacted people walking and biking. 19% of traffic crashes have involved a pedestrian or bicyclist. Fortunately, there have only been 2 severe injuries as a result of those collisions. But because of these high speeds, we are recognizing that it presents a concern for safety. So there are some strategies that we can implement to improve those conditions and design for a safer street. Narrowing the roadway or adjusting how wide each lane is increases driver awareness and helps people slow down. We can also dedicate space for people walking, biking, and rolling so that they have their own space that's apart from or separated from vehicles. We can make crossings shorter for people walking or reduce the number of lanes that are needed to cross to get across the street. Currently, pedestrians need to cross 8 or sometimes even 9 lanes of traffic to get across San Vicente. So between Olympic to La Brea, the existing street configuration has 2 primary segments, from La Brea to Redondo and then from Redondo to Olympic. A little bit of variation, but these segments really represent the street design throughout the corridor. There are also frontage roads and frontage or secondary roads, but the primary roadway design in these areas is consistent. And this project is not proposing any changes to the frontage roads at this time. So the existing street design from La Brea to Redondo, we have 3 travel lanes in each direction, parking on both sides of San Vicente, and a standard 5-foot striped bike lane that are striped with paint between the parking lane and the first driving lane. From Redondo to Olympic, so going north, the next segment maintains 3 travel lanes, continued, and then there's parking on both sides of the street. But the bicycle lanes, the existing bicycle lanes drop after the road narrows slightly north of Redondo. At the intersection, the layout changes a little bit where the median lane provides a left turn in each direction. And up against the curb, the parking lane becomes a right turning lane, or in some locations, a bus stop boarding zone. There are actually bus stops on both the near side and the far side on the right-hand side. So now we're going to move into looking at 2 of the proposed design concepts. The first proposed concept would be to maintain 2 travel lanes, repurpose 1 lane in each direction, and add bicycle or mobility lanes that continue north of Redondo to Olympic and include a striped safety buffer. This design would maintain parking and 2 lanes of traffic and all turn pockets. It adds that striped buffer, which is a safety feature, and also would provide the traffic calming benefit of reconfiguring one of the travel lanes. So a second proposed design concept would be to maintain 2 vehicle lanes in each direction, move vehicle traffic away from the curb, and create curbside space for people biking or rolling, or scootering or skateboarding, and add a vertical barrier in between the parked vehicles and the curbside lane. So the second design concept that moves cars away from the curb and adds space there is illustrated here. You can see how from the driver's point of view, the roadway feels and appears narrower. There are parked vehicles on the right, and traffic is moved away from the sidewalk and people's homes. So I'm going to spend a couple minutes talking about the benefits and considerations and potential trade-offs related to the design concepts. The proposed street design benefits more than just people using the mobility lane, and that's a really important takeaway that has seemed to come up in a lot of conversations, that there are benefits here that people who may not be bike riding are also looking for and interested in. Overall, the street can become a more comfortable place. People's homes are further from noise, pollution, and traffic. Pedestrians benefit from a slower street, fewer lanes to cross, and are further from moving vehicles. People on bikes, skateboards, and scooters are physically separated from moving vehicles. Drivers use safer speeds due to less road space. They're more aware, and they have a better organized street. The safety benefits are also significant. So predicted bike lanes reduce crashes between bikes and cars by 94%. The separated space appeals more to new and less confident riders, families, and women. A more comfortable street draws people, making better use of public space and creating a livelier corridor. And also, as we've mentioned a couple of times earlier in the presentation, construction here is limited to paint and plastic posts or bollards. So it's really cost effective, and it's also adjustable with future plans or changes to the street that may be coming online with other projects, and gives us flexibility to upgrade or make future improvements. So there are some considerations, and one of those is changes to parking. When we install a protected bicycle lane, we also have to introduce some new red curb to ensure visibility of both drivers and people using the bike lane. So we pull back some of the parking from driveways and corners and introduce that red curb to make sure that everyone can see each other and we have maximum visibility. This allows drivers to more safely enter driveways and cross streets, and people using the bicycle lane to see those vehicles coming. So we are trying to better understand what the parking needs and demands are on San Vicente. Right now, there are approximately 200 parking spaces on the entire corridor that this project falls on. We won't know a precise number of how many would be removed until we get further into the design process, but we typically estimate approximately 25% of parking spaces may be removed for this type of design. So help us learn more about parking on San Vicente. We have another survey with a couple questions. And those questions are, how often do you park on San Vicente, and do you consider parking in high demand? Great, and we'll give about 10 more seconds. All right, and I'll share the results. So of our respondents, 1 person parks on San Vicente every day. 4 people park there rarely. 1 person considers parking to be in high demand, and 4 people consider it not to be in high demand. So we have heard from a lot of community members that parking can be in high demand on San Vicente, and I'm sure it depends in part on how often you're parking there yourself, and what your experience is. So thank you for sharing feedback on those questions. So to continue discussing the benefits and considerations, I'm going to dive in for a minute on repurposing a vehicle lane and what makes it safer. Instinctually, I think it does seem to make sense to people. And what we've heard positive feedback that this treatment might make sense for San Vicente based on the speeds that are there today and people's experience on the street. But it is under consideration. So what exactly makes this safer? By removing a lane, there's less space and perception of a narrower corridor, which encourages drivers to use safer and more consistent speeds. It reduces unsafe lane changes and makes it more difficult to weave back and forth between multiple lanes. Drivers also become aware of what's on either side of them, of each other, and of pedestrians and bicyclists using the street. Pedestrians also have fewer lanes to get across to get across the corridor. So in this case, there would be 2 fewer lanes of car traffic to cross when crossing the street. And people on the sidewalk are further from moving traffic, pollution, and noise. So in either of the design concepts, vehicle traffic is moved away from the sidewalk by approximately an additional 10 feet. So either in a striped bike lane scenario or a protected bike lane scenario, pedestrians and people on the sidewalk benefit from having that wider buffer and the larger space between the sidewalk and moving vehicles. So what about traffic? Traffic volumes on San Vicente support that reconfiguration is feasible. Based on recorded data, we believe the number of traffic lanes, the number of vehicles traveling on San Vicente each day can be reallocated to 2 lanes instead of 3 without major travel delays. LADOT is continuing to collect data and confirm the projected impacts, and this information will be shared during the project outreach process. We also know, of course, as mentioned, that the speed limit was raised on San Vicente, and that indicates that speeds are trending up. And that's something that really validates that there are periods of time throughout much of the day, maybe really most of the day, where there's enough traffic that's allowing people to move at 40 miles per hour or more. So let us know what you think about travel time and the benefits and trade-offs we've talked about. Would you be willing to add time to your driving trips on San Vicente if it meant a safer, more connected street? And would you consider replacing car trips with trips walking, rolling, or biking if San Vicente felt slower and more comfortable to travel on? And I'm going to launch that poll. And we'll give that one about 45 seconds to a minute. Okay, I'll give it about 10 more seconds. And again, those questions are, would you be willing to add time to your driving trips if it meant a safer street on San Vicente? And for short trips that you normally take by driving, would you consider walking, bicycling, or transit if the street felt slower and more comfortable? Okay. And to share the results, we had one person indicate they would be willing to add as much as 10 minutes to a trip on San Vicente. 4 people said they would take as much time as it takes. They would be willing to add as much time as it takes. And one person indicated that they would not be willing to add time to their trips on San Vicente. And then it looks like everyone would be interested or maybe consider switching trips or shifting their mode to walking, biking, or transit for short trips if the street felt safer. So that's good news. And that's definitely one of the things that we're thinking about is it possible to reduce congestion on the street by offering this other option? And we think that's a really viable alternative. So what's next? Here's where we are in the project timeline. LADOT is continuing data collection regarding traffic and safety. We're in the conceptual design phase where we are defining with your input what features may be included in the project. We're aiming for a community update in April to continue the discussion and to respond to feedback received, provide more data, and hopefully to present initial design recommendations. Community engagement is ongoing during this time, and a final design would proceed in May with improvements beginning construction in June, again on the schedule that's been defined by the planned and scheduled street repaving at some time in June that we're planning for. So there are a couple of frequently asked questions that we wanted to touch on briefly since they've come up a lot. First is Metro working on San Vicente. And Metro, in addition to the D-line stations and the first last mile planning that Metro is doing, first last mile planning being planning for active transportation and safety improvements to the station, the stations that are coming online. Additionally, Metro is working on the Crenshaw Northern Extension, a rail transit project that was identified in Measure M, and would extend the Crenshaw LAX transit project currently under construction to the north to Mid-City and Central LA, West Hollywood and Hollywood. So Metro has selected 3 alignments for continued study. It's still very early in the project development phase, so there's still a lot of work needed to be done to define the preferred route alignment and design, and whether it is even above ground or underground. So as that process continues, there'll be opportunity for community weigh in and to revisit or revise or even enhance the near-term improvements that we're discussing for San Vicente now. So Metro is also going to be going back out to the community later this spring to begin the environmental process. And they have encouraged us to encourage everyone who's interested to sign up for more information and explore the project website, which is here, and we can link as well. So another frequently asked question is, will this project involve the asterisk or the intersection of Fairfax, Olympic, and San Vicente? So this project will connect to the asterisk and provide access to the hub there, but it will not impact that intersection. And we're not proposing changes to the intersection at this time. We definitely agree with community members that we've heard from, and LADOT recognize that the asterisk needs a really holistic approach that will assess the intersection for improvements and relieve congestion, and importantly, improve the experience at the ground level for people making the crossing and navigating through this intersection. There are efforts underway at LADOT and with community stakeholders to determine what improvements are necessary and should be made over time, but more extensive study and outside funding eventually will be needed. So share your feedback with us on San Vicente. We want to hear from you. We want to hear from as much of the community as we can. We'd love to hear from your neighbors and friends, so please spread the word. There is a project page on our website where anyone can add feedback to the project feedback map, which is shown here. You can link on the left side of the project webpage to add concerns, add proposed improvements, and tell us what the experience on the street is like. You can also email us or leave a voicemail with your comments about the project. And I think I mentioned this, but we're also open to hearing if you have recommendations or involved in an organization that would like to get more info about the project. And we've got one final survey to wrap up the discussion and get some final feedback at this point. Based on information shared today, are you supportive of one of the design concepts? And tell us what else you would like to know. I think the survey doesn't actually allow you to say what else you would like to know, but obviously you can put that in the Q&A feature. And we'll give this one about a minute as well. Okay, great. I think that's everyone. Well, maybe not everyone, but everyone that's going to answer. Thank you for participating in that poll. Definitely interesting responses. So 4 out of our 6 respondents said slower, safer speeds. 4 people indicated improved crosswalks and pedestrian crossings. Half of our respondents are interested in seeing the first design concept or standard bicycle or mobility lanes. And 5 out of 6 people are interested in seeing separated, protected bicycle or mobility lanes. And a couple folks have an other, and I'm sorry, I don't think we're able to add that other short answer field on Zoom poll, but again, please let us know in the Q&A, or if it's a comment, you can submit it by email as well. Oops, sorry, there's those results. And with that, we'll move to questions and answers, or hopefully answers, definitely questions. If there's anything we're not able to answer here today, we'll follow up with you. And again, we'll be compiling questions and answers to publish and circulate.
So, hi, I'm Babak. I've been monitoring the Q&A, and there was 2 questions kind of related just to the section of San Vicente, just to the west of the project segment, west of Olympic. One was concerned about closing the potential bike lane gap between Olympic and Wilshire Boulevard, because currently there isn't a bike lane there. So that could ease connections to the Purple Line La Cienega station. And a similar question is related to the traffic impact on that portion as well.
Yeah, that's a great question, and we have heard that question a lot. This project doesn't fully close the gap, or the work that we're proposing to undertake now doesn't fully close the gap from Redondo all the way to Wilshire. We could in the future consider installing similar improvements, or basically extending the improvements north of Olympic to Wilshire. It's not part of this project at this time, in part because the conditions do change a little bit, and frankly, the pavement condition is in a poor state of repair right now, and so part of why we're undertaking this work at this time is sort of a opportunistic response to pavement repair situation, and in the future, if the segment between Olympic to Wilshire was also improved, we could take a similar approach, or collaborate to move that project forward.
Great.
I think that answered the question.
Yeah, and then just in regards to there was a question in regards to the traffic impact on that segment as well, between Olympic and Wilshire.
So we have, I believe it's possible that the traffic volumes are higher on that segment. We are not studying that segment right now, but we have looked at the pre-existing data and recorded volumes for that segment, and I believe it is a higher volume, and we would have to look at sort of additionally.
Okay. There was a question, and Charlie kind of answered it in the Q&A box, but there was a question about, so I guess I'll just repeat the question as well as Charlie's answer, but How would this affect the bus stops on San Vicente? And Charlie, who's a project engineer, so that according to Metro's next gen bus plan, which is kind of their future bus plan, they're going to discontinue service on San Vicente Boulevard for lines 30 and 330. And there's going to be alternative bus services on Olympic, Wilshire, Beverly, and Santa Monica Boulevard. So there's another question in terms of how does this fit into the city's mobility plan, in terms of how is this going to contribute to a network of protected bike lanes within the city?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I know we sort of touched on the mobility plan at a high level, but didn't really dive into it. So San Vicente is part of the Mobility Plan 2035, which is the holistic long-range implementation plan for transportation networks in the city of LA. And actually, I might have, there we go. So to respond to that question, I anticipated this may come up, and this is a map of the mobility plan in this area. When the mobility plan was adopted, or prior to adoption, San Vicente was studied along with the rest of the surrounding street network to understand the role of every street, the role every street has in the network, and which modes, which streets are most appropriate to concentrate on and prioritize improvements for to support the needs over time with different types of improvements. So including for transit, including for vehicles, including for pedestrians. We do also have the transit enhanced network and pedestrian enhanced districts, and even a goods movement network. So San Vicente is on the Tier 1 bicycle enhanced network. This means it is a top priority street based on analysis and community outreach that was conducted at the time of the plan for those high quality, the highest quality bicycle enhancements and active transportation, multimodal enhancements. And it really does have kind of a unique network role. There isn't exactly a grid in this neighborhood, and Olympic is the vehicle enhanced network. So it's the street where really vehicle traffic is kind of envisioned to be prioritized and channeled to, but San Vicente is the way to access and really cut across a neighborhood where there aren't other direct routes. And as Charlie mentioned, it isn't a prioritized street for transit and on the actual street, which makes it actually a good opportunity for balancing other needs, balancing active transportation needs. So the mobility plan is not the final word on what any given street ultimately will be improved as, or how it should operate or look like. But it is, again, based on data and analysis and community outreach and a holistic network vision. So we're now back to say at this time, let's look at the street more closely as we prepare to implement this plan. And does it still make sense? Is it still a priority street for this? And it may be one of other several priorities, but this is the sort of the network context.
Great. So there's another question regarding to how will the protected bike lanes like phase out at big intersections? There was a concern that existing protected bike lanes become unsafe when traffic mixes at big intersections.
Yeah, so we're anticipating that at intersections, the curbside space may become a mixing zone. I think we're still kind of early in the design process, and we'll have intersection detail yet to come, particularly, once we determine a recommended design concept. And then we'll dive into individual intersection configurations. It has come up and before, will we provide protected intersections? And again, I think we're not quite at that level of design yet, but anticipating that we're most likely to design for mixing zones at the curb, or at the right lane, I should say.
Great.
I don't know if Charlie wants to add to that at all, but.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Could you repeat that question again?
That's okay. Just if you had any additional thoughts on the curb, or I'm sorry, the intersection design. So if we were to go with a protected bicycle lane as a preferred design recommendation, what the intersections would look like. And I mentioned that we're still pretty early in the design process and haven't determined the details of that yet. We're anticipating mixing zones at intersections, but have been asked to look at protected intersections as well.
Yeah, I think that's as good as answer as I can get. That was very, very, yeah, we're still early in the design phase, and we're definitely going to look into how to make it work for everyone at the intersection.
Okay. So there's a question about the Carthay, I don't know how to say the name, Carthay Circle neighborhood, which is kind of the adjacent residential area in terms of cars backing up. And the same person asked, it's kind of a similar question about would LADOT be able to work with Waze, the navigation app and other similar apps to turn off their program so that cars aren't kind of using the residential side streets as a cut through.
Yeah, great question. It's possible. I think it's possible, and it is a strategy. So specifically the strategy of working directly with Waze to try to prevent people from being redirected onto local or neighborhood streets. That is a strategy that we have employed in other locations, and I think fairly successfully, especially in balance with corridor projects as a way to sort of address potential impacts. And I know, with everyone using Waze these days, it is oftentimes one of the things that makes it easier for that to happen, for drivers to take turns that they might not otherwise. So I think it's a strategy we have in mind, and something that we will definitely be thinking about and looking to see if we have the opportunity for in this area.
And the next question, I think this might be the last question. There was concern about safety in terms of, all these users of the road and adding more bicyclists onto the road. And so the question is, will cyclists be required to carry liability insurance as motorists are to accommodate navigating the streets?
So the city doesn't require bicyclists to carry liability insurance. And I otherwise don't, I think I don't have a good answer to that other than, I think everyone is sort of responsible for driving and operating safely. I understand that sometimes there's concern about the way bicyclists use streets, we hear that, but understanding that, they are the most vulnerable road users. They do have to follow traffic laws. We're not going to be, the city isn't in a role to require bicyclists to carry liability insurance.
And that kind of sums it up for all the questions that have been, just reviewing them one more time, but I don't see any more new questions.
Okay.
Oh. There. Yeah, just kind of concerns about people using the Carthai circle neighborhood, but yeah, so just concerns about cut through. But yeah, I think you've kind of answered all the.
Are there particular streets? I'm sorry, I'm not able to see the Q&A for some reason, but are there particular streets in Carthage that are concerned?
Yeah, the one that Anne Rubin brought up was vehicles heading east from from the northern part. So they're heading east and they're turning onto Schumacher to reach Olympic to avoid the asterisk.
Okay. Okay, that we'll share that with our district office as well. That would sort of fall under the purview for their expertise on if there are additional strategies that we could look into to try and improve that condition.
Yeah, so they brought up a couple of streets: Schumacher, Commodore, Sloat, Hayes, and all those kind of cutting to Olympic. So I'll just make a note of that. Is there any more questions out there? I'm not seeing any more questions. So I think that might be it, Claire.
Great, thank you so much, Babak, and Charlie and Peter. Thanks to our team, and thank you to Abigail, our interpreter, in the other channel today. Thanks everyone for joining us. We really appreciate it, especially again in the middle of a Thursday morning. Again, please feel free to share the project information and contact information with your friends and neighbors, and look out for updates from us in the coming months. There will be a project, like I mentioned, we'll be aiming for a project update at some point in April to share some additional recommendations and information. In the meantime, get in touch if you have any questions, and thank you again for being here.